It's honestly mind-blowing when you really think about it. How did an incredibly unlikely group of flawed, everyday guys transform into the very pillars of a global faith? According to ancient texts and rich historical traditions, we aren't talking about powerful politicians or wealthy scholars here, not at all. We're talking about fishermen, tax collectors, and fiery zealots. So in this explainer, we're going to dive right in and explore their absolutely incredible transformations.
Okay, so here's our game plan. To truly understand the narrative dynamics of these 14 fascinating historical figures, we've grouped them by their dominant archetypes. We'll be looking at the inner circle, the connectors and seekers, the radicals, the quiet, and the betrayer. And finally, we'll look beyond the original 12. Let's get into it.
Starting off with part 1, the inner circle, proximity, and privilege. We're looking at Peter, James, and John, the innermost circle who witnessed extraordinary moments, like the Transfiguration firsthand.
You know, Jesus actually gave the brothers James and John this amazing nickname that completely highlighted their deep flaws. He called them Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. And honestly, it fit perfectly. I mean, these brothers literally asked if they should call down fire from heaven to consume a village that rejected them. They even had their mom go to Jesus and ask if they could sit at his right and left hand in his kingdom. Talk about ambition, right? But over time, that fiery, impulsive ambition was channeled into incredible sacrifice. James actually became the very first of the apostles to be martyred, beheaded by Herod. And John, the fiery hothead, was completely transformed into what early church tradition calls the apostle of love. He ended up writing these beautiful letters urging believers to just love one another, a complete 180.
Then there's Peter. Talk about a guy with dramatic extremes. On the one hand, you've got a man who stepped right out of a boat into a raging storm just because Jesus called him. That is a moment of pure, extraordinary faith. But then, you have this crushing human weakness. He denies even knowing Jesus to a servant girl just to save his own skin. And actually, scratch that, it wasn't just a denial. It was mere hours after promising he would literally die for him. Brutal, right? Yet the same impulsive fisherman, who wept bitterly over his failure, was eventually restored to lead the early church. It's a powerful reminder that our profound failures absolutely do not define our potential.
Moving right along to part 2, the connectors and seekers. Let's look at the guys who worked faithfully behind the scenes, acting as vital bridges to the master.
So, Philip. When Philip told his friend Nathanael that they had found the Messiah from Nazareth, Nathanael was incredibly skeptical. He famously shoots back, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Now, Philip didn't get defensive, he didn't argue theology, or try to force him into believing anything. His response was just this simple, profound invitation: come and see. Because Philip had a Greek name and background, he continually acted as this accessible bridge, seamlessly connecting seeking Greeks and skeptical friends directly to the master.
And then we have Andrew. He's the ultimate quiet bridge builder. Andrew never really sought the spotlight, yet he played a massive, vital historical role as the consistent connector. Did you know he was actually the one who found his brother Peter and told him about the Messiah in the first place? And later, when there's this massive starving crowd and all the other disciples are practically panicking, it's Andrew who quietly and practically notices a young boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish, setting the stage for that miraculous feeding. He is literally the textbook example of someone who operates quietly in the background but ends up setting world-changing events into motion.
All right, part 3, radicals, skeptics, and outcasts. This is where things get wild, because we see how this movement brought together absolute societal opposites.
Just picture the dramatic irony here. On one side, you've got Matthew. He's a tax collector, a Roman collaborator who likely extorted his own people for profit. He would have been universally despised as a traitor. Then, right across the table, you have Simon the Zealot. Simon is a fierce, revolutionary nationalist who literally wanted to violently overthrow the Romans and viewed paying taxes as flat-out treason to God. I mean, talk about a recipe for a fight, right? But putting a Roman collaborator and an anti-Roman extremist in the exact same inner circle, that totally proves the unifying power of this message. It completely transcended their intense political and social polarization.
Now, let's talk about the man famously known as Doubting Thomas. Honestly, that nickname is kind of unfair. If you track his journey, it actually starts with immense courage. At one point, he was ready to go and die with Jesus. Sure, that's followed by some honest confusion and, yes, his very famous skepticism after the resurrection, where he demands physical evidence. But look at where that timeline leads him in the end. It leads to the ultimate revelation, where he declares, "My Lord and my God." Thomas's journey is fascinating because it proves that demanding evidence and asking hard questions isn't the opposite of faith. Sometimes it's a deeply personal path to true understanding. According to ancient traditions, these transformed men took their message literally to the ends of the earth. And to put that into perspective, it cost them everything. Thomas took his newfound faith all the way to India, where he was martyred by spears. Peter actually felt unworthy to die the same way as his Lord, so he requested to be crucified upside down in Rome. Bartholomew, who remember was the skeptical Nathaniel we just talked about, he was martyred in Armenia. These fates prove just how deeply, how absolutely, these men believed the message they were spreading. They gave the whole shebang, every last thing.
Which brings us to part 4, the quiet and the betrayer, shadows in the circle. Let's move into a darker chapter to really understand the background figures and the ultimate tragedy of betrayal.
We get this really fascinating question from Jude Thaddeus during the Last Supper. He asks, "Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world?" And that right there perfectly captures the earthly confusion of the disciples. Like so many others, Jude was expecting a highly visible, political conquering hero. Someone who would just overthrow the Romans in this massive public display of power. He just couldn't grasp why Jesus was keeping things so intimate, so quiet. It's a great reminder that right up until the very end, these ordinary guys were struggling to comprehend a mission that was fundamentally spiritual, not political.
30. Just 30. When Judas Iscariot agreed to betray his teacher, the agreed-upon price was 30 pieces of silver. And what makes this so incredibly haunting is the historical context. According to the ancient text of Exodus, 30 pieces of silver was the exact compensation price for a dead slave. It wasn't just a random amount of money. It was a deeply symbolic, highly insulting price tag and a completely chilling fulfillment of ancient prophecy.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to see the profound contrast between Peter and Judas here. Both of these men were in the inner circle. Both of them failed Jesus completely, and they did it on the exact same night. But their responses to those failures dictated entirely different eternal legacies. Peter ran toward forgiveness. He wept bitterly, owned it, and allowed himself to be restored. Judas, on the other hand, felt deep remorse. He even tried to return the silver, but he just sank into absolute despair and hopelessness, tragically taking his own life. It's a stark reminder that the failure itself isn't the end of the story. It's how you choose to respond to it.
Finally, let's head into part 5, Beyond the Original 12, the Expanding Mission. Here, we're exploring the men uniquely chosen to carry the mantle forward after the resurrection and ascension.
So Judas is gone, and Peter outlines these very precise steps for replacing him, making sure that the highly symbolic number of 12 is restored. The criteria? The new guy had to be someone who had quietly witnessed the entire journey, right from the very beginning. They nominated candidates, prayed for God to reveal their true hearts, and then they cast lots. Now, casting lots wasn't just rolling dice for a gamble, you know? It was a deeply respected ancient Jewish practice, used to surrender the final choice entirely to God's sovereign will. And the lot fell to Matthias, a guy who had just served faithfully in the background the whole time, finally called forward.
But wait, the most mind-blowing transformation actually happened completely outside that original 12. Saul of Tarsus was literally breathing murderous threats against the early church. He was actively securing letters to go out and arrest believers. He was essentially their worst nightmare, their greatest enemy. But then, after a blinding revelation on the road to Damascus, he encounters the risen Christ, and that fierce, terrifying persecutor completely transformed into Paul the Apostle. He became the most passionate advocate of the faith, took the message to the Gentile world, and ended up writing 13 epistles of the New Testament, a real game changer.
Think about it. Judas had literally front row seats for 3 years. He walked beside perfection, managed the money, saw the miracles with his own eyes, and heard every single teaching, yet his heart remained completely untouched. Proximity just isn't enough. The rest of the men, though, with all their fierce tempers, their deep doubts, and their monumental failures, they actually allowed themselves to be molded by the message. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this. If physical proximity to the teachings couldn't change the heart of Judas, how will you let the profound lessons of these ordinary men transform your own life today? Keep seeking, keep questioning.